I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Dominica to introduce a statement by the Minister.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, delegates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce the pre-recorded statement by
Ned Doro, Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and Diaspora Relations of Dominica. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Dominica to introduce a statement by the Minister.
Thank you. Mr. President, Excellencies, delegates, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to introduce the pre-recorded statement by the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Darrow, Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and Diaspora Relations of the Commonwealth of Dominica at the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, the Honorable Dr. Kenneth Darrow. I thank you.
Mr. Secretary General, President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, on behalf of the government and people of the Commonwealth of Dominica, I congratulate you on your election to the presidency of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly and wish you every success. Mr. President, we are convening the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly at a time when our planet Earth is at its warmest and each and every member state is grappling with the impact of the deadly COVID-19 pandemic. Excellencies, the government of Dominica recorded its first COVID-19 case on March 22, 2020, and for more than 12 months, even with limited resources, we managed to keep our number of active cases within double digits and without recording a single COVID-19 related death. Because from the onset, our government adopted comprehensive COVID-19 containment measures and protocols. We have, however, in recent weeks seen a spike in cases and have recorded our first COVID-19 deaths. And we have had to redirect scarce resources to combat this surge while increasing investment in primary healthcare services. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, we consider ourselves fortunate and express gratitude for being a recipient of donations of vaccines from the government of India, the People's Republic of China, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, and through the COVAX facility. We are fully aware, however, that there are still several countries with no access to COVID-19 vaccines, and we call on member states and the international community by extension to acknowledge the importance of Resolution 74/274 adopted by the United Nations General Assembly, which calls for the strengthening of supply chains that promote and ensure universal, fair, inclusive, transparent, equitable, efficient, and timely access to medicines, vaccines, and other health supplies in order to address the COVID-19 pandemic. Dominica firmly supports the view that vaccines are a public good and that no one is safe until everyone is safe. Excellencies, the science has proven that vaccines are an important way out of this pandemic, and a coordinated response to COVID-19 is not possible without an open and supportive multilateral system. I wish to thank the World Health Organization, the Pan American Health Organization, the Caribbean Public Health Agency, and all our other bilateral partners for their continued support in our effort at preventing, detecting, and responding to this pandemic. And we are particularly appreciative of the leadership of FAO and its provision of vaccines, technical support, medical equipment, and supplies under the COVAX mechanism. Mr. President, Dominica would like to place on record our deepest gratitude to the government of India for allowing us to be among the first of developing countries to begin the vaccination of our citizens. We also express our gratitude to the government of the Republic of Cuba and the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela for allowing its medical brigade to complement the services of our healthcare workers who have been stretched to capacity, and to the government of Venezuela for supplying PPEs and test kits as part of our response. The government of the People's Republic of China continues to be a true friend to Dominica by being one of the first countries to our aid with the supply of masks, other personal protective equipment, ventilators, testing, and other diagnostic supplies, especially during the early days of the pandemic when these were extremely scarce. Mr. President, to survive this pandemic and to better prepare for the future, priority must therefore be given to universal access to quality healthcare services to all citizens. This will require a greater role for the World Health Organization and its hemispheric counterparts, such as PAHO, CARPHA, among others. For small island developing states like Dominica, the COVID-19 pandemic threatens to reverse the gains that we have made in the socio-economic development of our people by placing additional burdens on national budgets, as our governments are forced to provide increased support to our citizens. Excellencies, the closure of businesses and the additional cost of operating businesses during the restrictions occasioned by the actions to contain the virus is having an extremely debilitating impact on the private sector. Our tourism industries have been dealt a devastating blow, as the impact has been most severe in the hotel, hospitality, and service sectors. We must therefore work collectively to end this deadly pandemic. Mr. President, distinguished delegates, living with the COVID-19 pandemic and preparing for future pandemics must now become essential components of sustainable development. Developing countries like Dominica are at risk of not being able to meet our sustainable development goals if this pandemic continues to severely impact our people and countries. Thus, our international development partners, both bilateral and multilateral, must be more responsive and supportive of more creative financial instruments that take into account these new realities. Dominica is of the view that this new dispensation must also reward countries for progressive policies directing at creating sustainable systems for production and consumption. Universal access to quality health care must now be pursued more aggressively, whilst at the same time, access to quality and relevant education must continue if small states are to build capacity and advance their national sustainable development agendas. Mr. President, rising sea levels coupled with more frequent and extreme weather events make the Caribbean one of the most vulnerable regions in the world. Recent weather phenomena suggest that the climate is indeed changing, with increases in temperature, changes in the seasons, and erratic temperature variations. Fellow delegates, according to the World Bank study entitled Turn Down the Heat, the number of severe hurricanes is projected to increase by 40%, with double the intensity as warming rises by 2 degrees Celsius, and up to 80% in case of a 4 degrees Celsius warming. A single disaster event can affect an entire territory or economy and cause a disproportionately high loss of GDP, as was the case with Hurricane Maria, which affected all economic and social sectors in Dominica, with an estimated impact of 226% of GDP. Distinguished delegates, Dominica continues to call on the major polluters to take more aggressive actions to reduce global warming, as our planet will not be able to sustain life as we know it if they continue to pursue their unsustainable systems of production and consumption unabated. Dominica is working on becoming the world's first climate resilient nation, and we are committed to doing more than just adapt to the impact of climate change. But these major polluters must take up their responsibilities to support small island developing nations like ours to achieve these goals. We would like to thank our international partners who have helped to create CREAD, Climate Resilient Execution Agency of Dominica, to coordinate donor-funded climate resilient projects as we mainstream resilience across sectors. Mr. President, recently, the government of Dominica approved a comprehensive national resilience development strategy and the development of Dominica's Climate Resilience and Recovery Plan, CRRP, which further underscores government's commitment towards disaster risk reduction, resilience building at all levels, and the development of sound response and recovery mechanisms. Dominica looks forward to the renewal of discussions at COP26 in a few weeks' time, where commitments made under the Paris Agreement can be revisited and honored, especially as it relates to climate financing. This is a matter of climate justice. Dominica and other seeds are not responsible for the warming of our planet, but we are disproportionately impacted by the effect of climate change. Mr. President, one of the major contributors to climate change is the consumption of fossil fuel for the production of electricity and transportation. The importation of fossil fuel has over the years had the greatest impact on the economic vulnerability of many small island developing states. The transition of the energy sector away from fossil fuels, therefore, is central to reducing greenhouse gas emissions, building resilience to economic and climate-related events, and ultimately pursuing a sustainable development pathway. Mr. President, the Commonwealth of Dominica continues to pursue the development of its geothermal resources, as this will allow us to move away from the importation of fossil fuel for the generation of electricity within the next 5 years, while also reducing the cost of electricity to our people. The development of geothermal energy also has the potential to sustain clean mobility and to create a new industrial revolution powered by a cleaner and more affordable energy. To date, our efforts to develop our country's geothermal potential have been supported by several partners: the United Kingdom, the World Bank, SIDSDOC, the Caribbean Development Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the European Commission, the Government of New Zealand, the Clinton Climate Initiative, and the United Arab Emirates, and we would like to thank them all. Mr. President, the plight of our brothers and sisters in the Republic of Haiti continues, much to the concern of Dominica and the rest of the Caribbean community. Over the last decade, Haiti has struggled with rising poverty levels, sustained political instability, and numerous disasters, resulting in extreme hardship for citizens of this sister Caribbean nation. Haiti is currently in the top 10 countries experiencing a food crisis. The United Nations must therefore take leadership in coordinating targeted support to the Haitian government for the benefit of the Haitian people. Excellencies, our Caribbean region also continues to call for the discontinuation of the economic, financial, and trade embargo on our brothers and sisters in the Republic of Cuba. Notwithstanding this decades-old embargo, the Republic of Cuba continues to make a positive impact on our region and the wider world, and we renew our call on the government of the United States to allow the people of Cuba to be fully integrated into the global trading system, to improve their lives, and to allow the world to continue to benefit from their tremendous contributions, especially in science and technology. Mr. President, Dominica is convinced that as a collective, we have the ability to solve all of the challenges which confront us. The extreme pace of human advancement in the 21st century has demonstrated that we have the political will and capacity to combat climate change and to develop means of production and consumption to sustain humanity, while at the same time protecting our planet. We must all recommit to playing our part to save our planet and to improve the lives of citizens worldwide, those who suffer from hunger and starvation, and others who continue to be marginalized will be pointless without peace and security. The destruction brought about by wars within and between countries continue to displace millions of people from their homes, creating unprecedented refugee crisis. Mr. President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, The United Nations is a critical player in maintaining world peace and security, and Dominica remains committed to collaborating with the United Nations and all its agencies, as well as member states, to strengthen the mission of this noble institution. We commend the leadership of the Secretary General in this regard, and we reaffirm our confidence in the UN system as the ultimate negotiating and deliberating body for addressing major challenges confronting the world. Mr. President, history will record both our actions and inactions that can result in educating and saving our generation from this pandemic and from global warming and climate change, thus ensuring a safer planet for our children and future generations. I thank you.
I wish to thank the Minister for Foreign Affairs, International Business and Diaspora Relations of Dominica for the statement just made. Statement by His Excellency Nasser Bourita, Minister for Foreign Affairs, African Cooperation and Moroccans living abroad of Morocco.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Hassoumi Massoudou, Minister of State and Minister of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Niger. Mr. President, Excellencies, heads of state and government, heads of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. President, at the outset, allow me to extend my warm congratulations as well as my best wishes for success in connection with your successful election to the presidency of the 76th regular session of the United Nations General Assembly. I can assure you of my delegation's full availability to support you in the fulfillment of your noble mission. Allow me to also pay a well-deserved tribute to Mr. Volkan Bozkir for the excellent manner in which he conducted the work of the 75th session, despite the constraints of the COVID-19 pandemic. I would also like to congratulate Mr. Antonio Guterres on his re-election as Secretary General of the United Nations and commend him on his leadership in managing the COVID-19 pandemic, and in particular his plea for equity and solidarity vis-a-vis developing countries, as well as his tireless efforts to strengthen the capacity of our organization to meet the aspirations of our peoples to security and prosperity within the framework of an enhanced multilateralism. Mr. President, this present session takes place in a context in which the international community grapples with the negative socioeconomic repercussions of the pandemic. Indeed, many gains laboriously obtained by developing countries have been severely jeopardized, particularly in the context of the implementation of the African Union's Agenda 2063 and the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda of the United Nations. In addition, due to the spread of new variants of the virus and the slowness in vaccine distribution in developing countries, the prospects for recovery and growth in the short and medium term may also be jeopardized if active efforts are not taken to strengthen measures to combat this serious pandemic.
The Assembly will hear an address by His Excellency Mogwitsi Eric Kibetswe Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana. I request protocol to escort His Excellency. On behalf of the General Assembly, I have the honor to welcome to the United Nations His Excellency Mokgweetsi Eric Kibetswe Masisi, President of the Republic of Botswana, and to invite him to address the Assembly.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, allow me on behalf of the Republic of Botswana, and indeed on my own behalf, to join previous speakers in extending our congratulations to you personally and the Republic of Maldives on your well-deserved election as President of the United Nations General Assembly at its 76th session. Your election to the helm of this august body is a clear testament that the international community holds both you and your great country, the Maldives, in high regard and esteem. This is not surprising given the immense experience and career accomplishments you bring to this position, spanning over 3.5 decades. I'm fully confident that the United Nations General Assembly will benefit tremendously from your extensive diplomatic, executive, and legislative experience. As we continue to battle against and strive to recover from the dreadful COVID-19 pandemic and many other pre-existing global challenges, such as the climate crisis, your vision statement, which is anchored on 5 rays of hope, serves as an inspiration to many, including my own country, Botswana. In this respect, it is gratifying to note that your vision speaks to the topical issues confronting humanity to date, which should remain on top of the agenda of the United Nations. These include human rights, climate change, gender equality and the empowerment of women, terrorism and violent extremism, inequalities and injustices. As Botswana, we are pleased that you have prioritized these issues and committed to deliver for people, planet and prosperity, consistent with your firm belief in multilateralism and international cooperation. Mr. President, let me in the same breath take this opportunity to pay a befitting tribute to your predecessor, His Excellency Volkan Bozkır, for his effective guidance and leadership during one of the most challenging General Assembly sessions in the 75 years of the United Nations existence. The pandemic challenged us as member states and him as president of this esteemed body to be innovative and creative to ensure business continuity in order to keep the wheels of the United Nations running. Notwithstanding the limitations imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic, we welcome the fact that under the able leadership of the outgoing President of the General Assembly, we successfully convened some of the most important high-level meetings of the 75th session. These included the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations, the first ever summit on biodiversity, the 25th anniversary of the 4th World Conference on Women, dialogue on support to least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, digital cooperation, reform of the Security Council, and revitalization of the General Assembly. Most importantly, also was the convening of the 31st special session of the General Assembly in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, which ensured that as member states, we demonstrate our collective resolve to come together in support of effective global response to the unprecedented impacts of the pandemic and reinforce the principles of solidarity and shared humanity. Mr. President, my delegation therefore fully endorses your choice of the theme for the 76th session, namely building resilience through hope to recover from COVID-19, rebuild sustainably, respond to the needs of the planet, respect the rights of people, and revitalize the United Nations. The theme is consistent with the actions we need to take collectively to fulfill the legitimate expectations and aspirations of the people we serve at this difficult time in our history. Mr. President, we welcome your clarion call for hope because it sets a much-needed optimistic tone for this session, given the extreme urgency with which we must act under the challenging circumstances we find ourselves. Hope is a virtue that is at the very core of human progress. History is replete with examples of great things that can be achieved when hope is chosen over fear and despair. Our great organization that was founded after the devastating Second World War is itself a product and manifestation of hope. Even in the midst of the worst pandemic in a century, our actions should be driven by the belief that things can and will be better. A year ago, when I had the honor of addressing this noble assembly, we were all in shock as a pandemic wrecked through our national health systems, taking many lives, destroying livelihoods, overturning life as we know it, and ushering in a new normal of lockdowns and social distancing. A year later, we are still in the throes of the pandemic. However, advances in science has enabled the rapid development of vaccines. Given that science has delivered the vaccines, now it is time for world leaders, guided by the ideals of the United Nations Charter, to ensure that this life-saving resource is distributed equitably. Without a doubt, a worldwide vaccination campaign that ensures that all countries, especially the developing countries, have urgent access if we are to contain the continuing spread of this deadly virus and its more transmissible variants. Mr. President, it is for this reason that Botswana shares the frustration by many and strongly supports a call for the vaccines to be treated as a global public good, as this is key to recovery and rebuilding better from the COVID-19 pandemic. I take this opportunity to commend the efforts made by some of the developed countries to support developing countries, especially those in Africa, which have very low vaccination rates. I wish to thank sincerely our development partners who have donated vaccines and other forms of assistance to Botswana, in particular to help to fight the COVID-19 pandemic, which is spreading exponentially now in my country and claiming many lives. The donation is an indication that the global community is slowly heeding the call by the Secretary General that no one is safe until everyone is safe. But we have also seen how the uncontrolled spread of the virus triggers the emergence of new variants. A more equitable global vaccination rollout program is urgently needed if we are to win the race against the new variants. Let us be mindful of the fact that a variant somewhere is a variant everywhere. Mr. President, I'm happy to inform that my government has prioritized saving our people from this pandemic. In addition to encouraging our people to practice the necessary COVID-19 preventive measures, we have also channeled extra resources to the health sector. This includes purchasing of vaccines through the COVAX facility, the African Vaccine Acquisition Task Team, AVAT, and through bilateral arrangements. While we have purchased enough vaccines to reach herd immunity, the current logistical supply chain challenges continue to hamper our vaccination plans. However, the slow rollout of vaccination programs in the global south, including my own country, cannot be solely viewed in terms of economic laws of demand and supply. Let us accept that the prevailing vaccine inequity is the real problem and a reflection of the inherent weaknesses of our multilateral system. We must therefore recommit both in deeds and words to the pledge we made at the commemoration of the 75th anniversary of this organization to strengthen international cooperation, coordination, and solidarity. One way of doing so is through the sharing and transfer of knowledge and waiver of intellectual property rights on vaccine production. We are ready to work with all stakeholders to make this a reality. We in Botswana are open to capacity strengthening for the production of COVID-19 vaccines. In order to make the desired impact under your able leadership, the United Nations system, and especially the principal organs, must work closely together and act jointly in a coordinated way. While my country holds the presidency of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC, we will strive together with you, Mr. President, to strengthen coordination and collaboration between the two principal organs of the United Nations that we lead. As you indicated in your vision statement, this will assist to make the United Nations stronger and more effective in discharging its mandate. Mr. President, our economies are still reeling from the impact of the heavy blow inflicted by the unparalleled scale of the pandemic. For small economies in particular, pre-existing challenges have been worsened on the economic mainstays such as trade, tourism, and the extractive industry. This undermines our ability to implement the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its SDGs. Unfortunately, it is the most vulnerable and neediest in our societies who run the risk of being left furthest behind. However, all is not lost. I am hopeful that if we press the reset button, reaffirm our commitment to multilateral ideals, and we accelerate the implementation of SDGs in this decade of action, as you rightly point out also in your vision statement, Mr. President, financing, trade, technology, and debt sustainability are some of the prerequisites for attaining the goals. My delegation has also taken note of your call for rebuilding back better, stronger, greener, and bluer. We could not agree more. The idea of doing different things differently is in line with our current approach at home. Upon realizing the scale of disruption occasioned by the pandemic, my government has instituted a reset agenda which comprises 5 priorities that are also aligned to the priority themes of your presidency. Firstly, the government is fully committed to save Botswana's population from COVID-19 through health programs that include vaccination. Secondly, we are reforming the public service to ensure effective implementation of government policies. Thirdly, we are accelerating digitalization in the delivery of services by government and creating enabling conditions for the active involvement of the private sector and society in the uptake and utilization of digital technologies. Our 4th priority is value chain development. This entails unlocking more value in key sectors such as mining, tourism, agriculture, and education by way of innovation and creativity of our people, especially the youth. This priority is aimed at accelerating economic diversification and youth empowerment and the employment. The 5th priority relates to mindset change. Here, the aim is to inspire people to own the national development goals, as well as to embrace the goals of both disposition and action. My government believes that the reset agenda and its priorities, which are in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, will enable us to recover from it stronger and to realize our development aspirations as enshrined in our National Vision 2036 and the 11th National Development Plan. These national frameworks are aligned to the global blueprint or in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the African Union's Continental Agenda 2063. We are, however, mindful of the fact that in an increasingly interdependent setting, Botswana's development trajectory is inextricably linked with that of the rest of the world. Now more than ever, multilateralism, international cooperation, and global solidarity is imperative. The onus is therefore on this Assembly as the main deliberative, policy-making, and representative organ of the UN to strive for a better world. A world where no country is left behind in attaining the 17 SDG goals. Beyond what we can do as individual countries, it is also our hope that the lessons being learned from this pandemic will enable the United Nations to find innovative ways for enhanced collaboration with regional and sub-regional organizations to ensure preparedness for future pandemics and epidemics. Mr. President, you assume your global leadership role at a time when the world is grappling with a myriad of other pressing global challenges, including devastating natural disasters associated with climate change, with small island countries among the most vulnerable. In the recent months, massive and uncontrolled floods swept across Western Europe, Asia, and other places, destroying riverbanks, homes, and killing hundreds in their wake. Hurricanes, typhoons, and storms, as we just again witnessed in countries like Haiti, the United States, and other places, are a major cause of devastation to critical infrastructure worth billions and contributory to humanitarian crisis. In the same wavelength, my own region, Southern Africa, has not been spared from the atrocious path of climate change, included disasters evidenced by the rainy seasons, triggering floods, and combined with the devastating cyclones Kenneth and Idaya and Cyclone Eloise. This recurrent situation also calls for our region to strengthen its early warning and disaster preparedness mechanisms through regional collaboration with all stakeholders with the support of the United Nations. Whereas the past decade has already been the hottest in our planet, in recent months, more record-breaking temperatures and other climate change-induced incidents signal the real danger of increased global warming. The International Panel on Climate Change has again recently warned of a code red for humanity. Today, more than ever before, our planet has evidently become dangerously warmer, triggering melting ice, rising seas, floods, cyclones, hurricanes, droughts, and other extreme weather events, combined with air pollution, these events destroy impeccable ecosystems, leading to negative repercussions for sustainable development, health, and food production systems, as well as food security. Mr. President, we have all along recognized that climate change is the greatest challenge we face, and indeed a real existential threat, demanding the urgent need to take bold measures to regulate the manner in which we interact with our environment by, among others, adopting technologies that reduce carbon emissions. I'd like to still believe that we can prevent the situation from getting much worse and provide innovative solutions. As former Secretary General Kofi Annan once reminded us, the world is not ours to keep. We hold it in trust for future generations. In September 2015, we committed ourselves to working tirelessly for the full implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development in all its three dimensions, being economic, social, environmental, in a balanced and integrated manner that also embraced the full respect for the enjoyment of all fundamental human rights. In the interest of time, Mr. President, I will skip and deposit the rest for the record, only to finish by saying it is regrettable that at a time when the main battle should be won against an invisible enemy, COVID-19, we continue to witness acts of violence which seek to take advantage and further threaten international peace and security. In our sub-region, where I had the privilege to serve as chair of the Southern Africa Development Community, SADC, organ on politics, defense, and security until recently in August 2021, we have committed to countering and eliminating the threat of terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. In addition to the threat to peace and stability brought about by terrorist insurgents in Mozambique, which we condemn, sanctions against Zimbabwe are a setback to our stability in the region. Botswana therefore calls on the international community to end sanctions against Zimbabwe. At the national level, my government continues to take steps towards keeping our people safe and thus contributing to the larger ideal of the maintenance of international peace and security. In this connection, my government has signed a memorandum of understanding with the United Nations Office of Counterterrorism in June 2021 with a view to enhance Botswana's capabilities and ability to better detect and deter terrorism. Mr. President, in concluding my remarks, let me reaffirm Botswana's abiding faith in the principles and purposes of the Charter of the United Nations, as well as the various multilateral instruments, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and other protocols calling for universal access to education, good quality health care, food, rights of people with disabilities, women and children, as well as creating adequate opportunities for our youth population.
First of all, I would
Let me reassure you, Mr. President, of my country's full support, commitment, and cooperation in enabling you to fulfill your mandate during this 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I thank you for your attention.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the President of the Republic of Botswana for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
I now give the floor to His Excellency Jean-Claude Gakoso, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Cooperation, and Congolese abroad of the Congo.
Monsieur le Président de l'Assemblée générale, Mesdames et Messieurs les chefs de délégation, Monsieur le Secrétaire général de l'Organisation des Nations Unies, Mesdames et Messieurs, l'ONU, faut-il vraiment le rappeler, a vocation à conduire les peuples du monde vers le bien-être collectif et la prospérité. vers la justice, la paix, la sécurité et le développement, conformément à sa charte. L'ONU reste, tout compte fait, la seule organisation capable de rassembler toutes les nations autour d'une action collective efficace, aux fins d'atténuer les conséquences de fléaux divers et variés, susceptibles de déstabiliser des pans entiers de l'humanité, si ce n'est l'humanité elle-même. Même dans les moments les plus difficiles de notre histoire commune, l'ONU a toujours su entretenir la flamme de la solidarité universelle. Elle a toujours su maintenir la mobilisation de la communauté internationale dans la recherche de solutions durables face aux périls collectifs. Et c'est bien pour cette raison que mon pays, la République du Congo, a profondément foi et créance en cette organisation au destin unique dans l'histoire. Malheureusement, force est de constater que malgré son engagement louable pour la paix dans le monde, malgré son plaidoyer infatigable en faveur du bien-être de la multitude, chaque année, des millions de personnes continuent de mourir de faim dans le monde. Chaque année, faute de médicaments, des millions d'autres continuent de mourir de maladies pourtant curables, telles que la typhoïde et la malaria. Et aujourd'hui, ce sont des milliards de personnes qui manquent de vaccins face à cette pandémie à Covid-19 qui laissera très certainement une empreinte indélébile sur notre siècle. Une pandémie qui est un ennemi redoutable, s'il en est un, pour nous tous. Un ennemi contre lequel nous devons impérativement mutualiser nos intelligences et nos forces. Ce n'est que unis et solidaires que nous pourrons vaincre ce virus qui met en danger l'existence même de la vie humaine. Je le dis en ayant une pensée toute spéciale pour les habitants de cette merveilleuse ville de New York qui nous accueille et qui en a tant souffert. Dans mon pays, mesdames et messieurs, dès l'apparition des premiers cas Covid, le gouvernement a vigoureusement pris le taureau par les cornes. À ce jour, il a procédé à la vaccination complète d'un peu plus de 180 000 personnes, soit près de 5,21% de la population du pays. C'est ici l'occasion d'exprimer nos vifs remerciements à tous les pays amis, à tous les partenaires techniques et financiers qui ont favorisé l'accès de mon pays aux vaccins à travers des dons directs ainsi que par le biais de différentes initiatives, dont les initiatives COVAX et AVAT. Monsieur le Président, il y a 6 ans, en 2015, dans cette même enceinte, portée comme par un élan collectif de solidarité, nous nous étions résolus à inscrire la lutte contre la pauvreté et la promotion